Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today I have a guest, Daniel Goodenough, who's been on my show before. He's the author of the recently released book of fiction, The Caravan of Remembering, a roadmap for experiencing the awakening of your life's mission. He's been a professional musician, a research scientist, and a graphic designer for several years. In the past 30 years, as he's been doing this, he's helped thousands of students through the Way of the Heart program to discover their authentic life path and to walk that path in the world. Recently, he has been consulting with companies to help them to do business differently with mindfulness, integrity, and heart. And I want to welcome to my show again, Daniel Goodenough.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You know, Daniel, I want us to catch up a little bit. You know, you and I did I think, a great show together, and it's been quite some time. So tell me what's been going on since the last time that we did the show together.
Well, we've been continuing the classes for the Way of the Heart with the basic life mission work, and the Caravan of Remembering is moving out into the world. It's been added to the on-demand cafe printers, so that in areas of the world where they don't have the usual distribution, you can have it printed as you wait in libraries and those kinds of places. And the corporate work is expanding, working with a larger network of entrepreneurs, and still working with the corporate people we were working with before. And we've got a pilot project where we're working with a restaurant chain to work with home office people and crew people and managers, the entire, let's say, hierarchy of the company, to do the life mission work all together, to align the personal life mission with the corporate life mission for all levels of the company.
Let me ask you something, Daniel. You know, you just mentioned the corporate world, and what's going on in the corporate world, I think, is that people are doing so many different things that they never thought they'd have to do. They're just involved in so many projects, and the stress level must be huge. Have you experienced that there's been a change in our workplace, in our workforce, and essentially people are just multitasking and spending so much time on the computer that it's had an effect on them?
I have noticed that certainly there's a higher pressure to this somewhat unrelenting move to increase productivity without let's say, the compensation monetarily keeping up with that productivity. So while at the same time people are feeling the financial pressure, the pressure to produce more is increasing. So then that always brings you back to, why am I doing this? So it really does help then if the company acknowledges the need for the work to be meaningful for people, and I think there is a trend that companies are realizing that. So I think you are seeing more, at least, public acknowledgement of the need for meaning. So I think that's an opportunity. There's still statistically a great large percentage of people who are actively disengaged. There are the people. I heard 87% recently of people are unhappy at work, but I think it was 60-some% are actively disengaged.
Daniel, you have a program which is called the Way of the Heart, and it seems like companies, the corporate world doesn't really care about people's heart and their path and their desire to do things that really help the company because they're disengaging. As you said before, they're just disengaging. So speak to that if you don't mind, because I'd like to understand a little bit more, and I think our audience would too.
Well, I think that's changing a bit. I think companies are starting to realize that the high cost to the company of the active disengagement it can take the form of high turnover, can take the form of a lot of call-ins, absentee, or just actually, let's say, passive-aggressive sabotage. Maybe not of a major form, maybe largely subconscious, but a kind of sabotage of the body being there but no one home kind of thing. So
yeah.
I think there's a presence to the cost that's bringing to the companies, and many companies are starting to get interested. A lot of the work that we've been doing has been, let's say, mid-level entrepreneurial as well, where maybe they don't have 1,500 employees, maybe they have 50 to 100 employees, and so that's, I think, the level that it's more often showing up, where these 50 to 100 people that are working for me, we could have a conversation about aligning their why, why they're here, what that calls them to do, and who that calls them to be with the work they're doing with that enterprise. And then at the same time, this company I'm working with does have 1,500, corporation I'm working with does have 1,500 employees, and that does actually leave a fair amount of room for people to even change a position to be more in alignment with what they feel is their calling. So I think we're working it out, and I think it's a new thing for business, and maybe hopefully we're at the front of the wave of that.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I'm glad to hear it, actually, because that gives you a little bit of hope. Now, I'm interested. You since you've been doing this, you must have a story. I don't want to hear about a specific person, but I would like to hear about a specific story which kind of lightened your life and made you feel that you're doing a great job. So if you would tell the audience a story that happened to you which really may impress the audience a little bit, but more than impress, I want them to understand, what you've experienced.
Well, I would say, an example of the corporate transition, I would say, is that when you have this conversation about people's personal life mission and the corporate life mission, and people start to get in touch with their personal life mission and calling, and then start to express to the company, I have this position and I feel a calling to do this. The stories of creating, let's say, a kind of cooperative, affiliate-like creation of programmings in their community to uplift their community. One person felt the calling to create a daycare program for minimum wage workers who, minimum wage isn't, the truth is minimum wage isn't really a living wage.
Right.
And so the need for daycare, the need for affordable housing can be felt by someone even when they're working full time. And some of the people working for this company felt that their calling had them wanting to do something about that, and they did do something about that. They're creating programs that are somewhat funded by the corporation and somewhat funded by local things, and together they're putting together programs, and they're starting with some of the very people who work for that company who are on minimum wage, saying, okay, so the company can step up and along with the community creates an answer to some of the problems that frankly wouldn't be answered even by raising their wages a little bit, because the problem
there are people who will say, Daniel, they'll say, well, if a company raises the minimum wage, let's give a figure, something like $16 an hour or $17 an hour, that it's going to have an impact on the company. Sometimes the impact is worse than the actual giving of the money and the effects of the money, because companies will give less hours to the person. Do you agree with that? Do you think that that really happens? And if so, how do you change that?
Well, there's a both and about that. Long-term research has shown that the loss of work is very much exaggerated by the raising of the minimum wage. That long-term, when the minimum wage is raised, there isn't really a net loss of jobs out there or even hours. And at the same time, it can be surprising how much 25 cents an hour over several thousand employees can mean to a company.
Yeah.
So there's a both and about that. And the other part about that is, let's say if you're in certain situations, let's say, there's areas where the minimum wage is $11 an hour and you raise it to $15 an hour, the unfortunate thing is that becomes a net loss for those people, in that you raise their salary just enough for them to lose the benefits they've been getting.
Yeah.
The county benefits, the state benefits, the help they get with making rent payments and maybe food stamps and, those kinds of things at $15 an hour in some cases. That's just enough money for them to lose those benefits, which means now it's a net loss to them. Yeah. So regardless if the company takes the bite and says, yeah, we can do that, that isn't really helping them. That's why, in the case I was just describing, the movement was to, okay, what really would be of help more than that extra $4 an hour would be a real help with daycare and affordable housing and affordable food and that sort of thing. That $4 an hour wouldn't handle that, but if we could do that for them. And so that was the place where the energy went, to solve the problem in a way that money, a few dollars an hour, wouldn't really have that kind of a benefit.
Yes, makes a lot of sense, actually. Now, with regard to getting in touch with one's life mission or authentic life path, I would like you to explain to our audience what that really means, because a lot of people, when you talk to them about their life mission, they say, well, I have no idea. I have no guidance. I really have no thoughts about where I can go and what I can do and whether I'm capable of it. But you can probably explain to people how to put themselves on the right path. Would you do that for our audience now?
Sure. You might remember I've mentioned that, okay, so the life mission is the why, what, and who. Why am I here? What does that call me to do? And who does that call me to become? And I sometimes make the distinction between vision, mission, and purpose, in that your vision, it might be like people have a vision of, a great holiday or a great family experience. And, vision is what you see as possible. And in the larger sense, then the way it gets collapsed into life mission is vision is what you might be what you see as possible in the world that other people might also be working on. Like, I'm not the only one talking about life mission, so that I have a vision of possibility where the world takes it for granted that every human being is here for a reason, and that when we don't help anyone follow through on that, anyone who doesn't follow through on that, we all lose. That everyone pays a price for anyone not doing their life mission, so we take it for granted that culturally, collectively, it would be important for us to support that for each other. That's a vision that I have as a possibility. Other people might be working on that. The mission then is the unique way you would go about that. It's unique like a snowflake or a fingerprint. It's your way of doing the thing that other people might be. And how I distinguish that from purpose is that, sometimes your purpose is to get to the other side of the room, or sometimes your purpose is to finish your work quickly so you can go home at 5 o'clock. Sometimes your purpose is to clean up your office so you can take the weekend off. Sometimes we have a lot of purposes that it may have very little to do with why we're here. So that's that distinction. So then when it gets down to, okay, so what's my unique, singular, like a snowflake or a fingerprint, way of stepping into a vision of possibility that might be mine to do in the world? And that would be, what's my why? And then what does that call me to do? And who would I need to be to do it? And who will I become by doing it? Right. And, the what is the outer life mission and the who is the inner life mission. And the vehicles for the what may change, so it's not a job. You can express your life mission through a career, and you have a family life mission and a community life mission and a spiritual life mission, and yes, there could be a career life mission. So there's, it's not limited to a job, and it's not a job. Those are vehicles for the expression of our mission.
Right.
So then, how do you do that?
Yeah.
That's the piece where it comes down to it's skill development, like the ability to do that, the ability to clarify and articulate the what, why, and who, to be able to say to anyone, anywhere, under any circumstance, here's what I'm here to do, here's why I'm here, here's what they, at the current moment, would be the vehicles of expression for that. This is who I'm called to be. And how do you do that? It's like anything else. If you're a musician, there are skills to practice. If you're an elite athlete, there are practices you do to develop your skillfulness. So that comes down to, what are the scales? And I could, share a few. So if I was going to say, you might start with childhood, but it's not about, in this particular case, it's not about therapy. It's not about why were you broken or what was your trauma from childhood. Therapy is a wonderful thing, and people can get a great benefit from doing that. It's just that's not this conversation. This conversation is maybe more what was right about your childhood, or what was it about your childhood that was preparing you for what you're called to do now. And so examples of that is like, what were your favorite stories in your childhood? And most importantly, why were those stories your favorite? What were your favorite movies, and why were those your favorite movies? And what were your favorite places? And as in all of these things, why were they your favorite places? Why were they your favorite activities? Why were your heroes those heroes as opposed to other heroes? What's that saying about the blueprint called you that's pointing towards the future you were being pointed towards?
Right.
Well, just to give a couple more, let's say, current ones, if, later in life you might say, in our time right now, when you go to a big box bookstore and there's a section for everything, which section do you go to first every time? Why? What is that telling you about how you're wired? And, maybe what's the first section, second section, third section, or you could say, what's the book I would love to have written? If you could just change one thing in the world and you had to pick just one, what would it be? You could ask yourself, what's the question at the center of my life? What's the question my life was meant to be the answer to? And if you look at what you're fascinated by, what you're motivated by, what about that? Why are you fascinated by those things? What is that pointing to? When you're motivated by X, Y, Z, what's the deal with that? Why, as opposed to these other things you could be motivated by? What wakes you up? What wakes you up that makes other people afraid? If you said, let's go do this, and many people might go, whoa, that sounds dangerous, and you go, yeah, isn't that great? What is it that wakes you up? And speaking of heroes, who are your heroes now? And it's like, and why? And if you could say, if you thought, for instance, you wanted to be a writer, and I asked you all your heroes, and none of your heroes were writers, you might question that. So if you said, I want to be a lawyer, and none of your heroes studied law or were a lawyer at any point, because a lot of journalists are lawyers. A lot of people who present on TV are lawyers. So it might be hard to say. So if you said, I want to be a commentator on TV, and none of your heroes are lawyers, there might be something to look at there. So those are, like, say, later in life things, and you could say, what's the legacy you want to leave? And I could go on. There could be hundreds of questions, but it's about being in the inquiry of, why am I here? What does that call me to do? And why do I care about these things? And why am I drawn to these things? And why is that important to me? And by asking those questions, not all of those questions every day, but a few of those questions every day, you start to develop the skill, like developing a skill with an instrument, only in this case the instrument is called you, and the music is called your life.
Oh, well, that's a great explanation for living a good life. But, Daniel, here's the thing. Young children, okay, and maybe not that young, but they need guidance. They need to understand a little bit more about life. So if you had an opportunity to work with a family who have young children, would you discuss these different missions and paths that they can kind of encounter or face or do? I mean, because it should start it early in life, and parents have a lot of influence on their children. So if you were to guide a man, a woman, a father, a mother, and say, look, start from when your kids are pretty young and explain to them some of the things that they should know, would you do that? And how do you do that with a young kid?
Well, yes, I would, and maybe I would start. The great advice from the the Book of Wisdom, Proverbs. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart from it. And another translation, it would be create an environment for life according to their gift or bent, and when they are older, they will not depart from it. So the key to, let's say, early on is to be present to their gift or bent, and create an environment for life in which their gift or bent can flourish. And there's nothing that, it's kind of a hard thing, it's like as a parent that you heartfully, in the first translation, train up a child in the way they should go, it might seem like the parent is supposed to tell the child how to grow. And what I like about the other translation, create an environment for life according to their gift and bent, is saying, as a parent, it's more like stewardship, and you're present to who is this being that I have stewardship, and what's their why? What lights them? Some of those same questions. What lights them up? What motivates them? What do they care about? If you notice your children are gravitating towards certain heroes or stories, you might have a conversation about, so what is it about this superhero? We're in the age of superheroes. What is it about this superhero that draws you in particular? What is it you like about this character? And just in all these places of being present to what they're drawn to, what they're magnetized by, and create an environment for life for the exploration about that. It doesn't mean that you have to immediately jump to they like music, so they're supposed to be a musician. It's just, because music develops the brain. Maybe they just are gravitating to music because they need that to develop their brain. So it's just, as you move forward, having the conversation, research has pointed out that when someone does what they feel they're called to do, later in life they win the lottery, or they get a big inheritance, or maybe they retired and they retired well, what they choose to do then is almost always what they already knew they wanted at 7. And that correlates to a certain kind of brain development, so that up to a certain point, that's a kind of pointless conversation about the specifics. But right around 7, the research would say that actually most children do know at 7, and then our culture kind of talks them out of it. Between the media and the parents and teachers and all of that, they kind of get, it's like, wow, that's very cute, but, what are you going to do for a real job kind of thing?
Right.
And so what I would say for a parent is that if already at 7 they do know, then, my conversation with children, 7 and younger, like when I meet a really young child, my whispering in their ear would be, don't forget. Because it's already wired in. So then at 7, I say, I might ask them, not what are you going to be when you grow up? It's like, what's your passion? Yeah.
What you would ask a 7-year-old, what's your passion?
Yeah.
Huh.
Because I'm not trying to pigeonhole it in a job, because if you, like the work I'm doing now, I promise you, when I took those tests in high school by the guidance counselor about career advice,
right.
The thing I'm doing now is not in that catalog, I promise you. And most people will have to invent their work now. That's how fast things are changing. So rather than ask them, what do you want to be when I grow up, I go, what are you excited about? What are you passionate about? And if you stay in that conversation with your children about, it's not about the job. Let's start with what you're drawn to, what you're excited about, what you're motivated by, what lights you up, what wakes you up, what's the environment for life for you, giving them enough space to explore the possibilities and stay in the inquiry. Staying in the inquiry about the why, what, and who for your entire life from 7 on for sure. I mean, it doesn't have to, you don't have to wait till 7, because at 7 it's kind of crystallized. So that's a great point to help create enough space that they don't get talked out of it.
Yeah.
That they have enough space to consider, even though this seems a little bit like magical thinking right now. They're a 7-year-old. That's okay, because as they mature, that will become more quote-unquote practical. But it can become more imaginatively practical. And it can be a job that they create for themselves, as most children now will have to do.
Yes.
Or they will need to develop the skill of continually recreating themselves and especially their work in the world, because the average child, the latest I heard, the average high school graduate will have 16 different careers in their lifetime.
16. I remember reading about 7. Now you're talking about 16. Wow.
Yeah, the latest 16. And and a lot of those will have to be careers that you will have to create for yourself. So if you're not clear about why you're here and how you're wired and what your environment for life is, what are you going to do that recreation of self with? Something you see in the paper is a trend. By the time you get it together to do that, that trend will have moved on. So, so the saying is that your best job security is being clear about your why, what, and who. Because then you have a shot. Like, what's the life force when in Daniel Coyle's Talent Code, when he's talking about what does it take to build mastery in anything? The proverbial 10,000 hour thing that we've heard a lot about.
Sure.
It's 10,000 hours of conscious, quote-unquote, deep practice. And his comment was, that's 3 hours a day for 10 years. I don't, if it's your passion, it probably doesn't take 10 years. But so if it is your passion, you probably have already been working on it. But my point was, what he said is, you won't put in 10,000 hours of deep conscious practice unless you have ignition. So what's your ignition? It's your why. If you're clear about your why, what, and who, that's your ignition to keep recreating yourself and developing the mastery of the ability to keep creating yourself. So those life mission scales I talked about, the inquiry about why am I passionate about that? What does it call me to? What's my interest? What would I talk long into the night about? What's the beauty I love? Rumi said, let the beauty you love be what you do. What would that be for you? Like those kinds of questions, if you keep asking those questions, from that builds both the ignition, because the closer you get to your why, the more ignited you are about that, and also the skillfulness with, if you have to create your own work, what are you going to create that from? And if you've become masterful at articulating your why and what that's calling you to do in the world, how to do that almost comes with a clear understanding of the what. If you're really clear about the what, the how is almost already laid out for you. As long as you're really clear about it and you have the ignition to step into it.
Now, Daniel, it's fascinating. There's no question, and I love the thought that somebody, at a very early age can create a mission for themselves. I think it's incredible. But here's the thing. There are a number of jobs, and I'm being very, kind of, how should I say this? I'm trying to be authentic. I'm trying to really deal with what's going on today. And what I do know is that there are hundreds upon hundreds of jobs for people who want to be electricians, want to be plumbers, want to be engineers, various jobs that, years ago people loved and they made a good living from. And today, there's nobody filling the gap. People are retiring from those positions, and nobody is filling the gap. And what they're trying to get are these very sexy jobs like communications, sportscasters, IT guys. And even then, there's a need for, they say anyway, for thousands upon thousands of IT guys, and nobody is there to fill the position. Do you agree? I mean, and if so, do you feel that there's some sort of issue going on in our society today which sort of dictates what our children should do when they grow up?
Well, the collective impulse to dictate what children should do when they grow up, we've had that forever. That's since the beginning of time. And, it's like when you had the Smiths or the Taylors. The family name is what you did. So if your parents did that, that's what you do. And well-meaning, the injunction, when I was young, the popular thing was to be a doctor, a lawyer. If it paid well, then yeah, you should probably go to school, get a degree, and go do that.
Right.
So the pressure to dictate to children what they should do has always been with us. I think the current trend of the meaning gap has left us with the craft gap and the gap of people well trained.
Right.
And so, but whether that's trained for IT or trained for the professions, or whether it's trained for the crafts or the guilds, that meaning gap is the long-term consequence of projecting culturally that it's all about the money. And when it's all about the money, then you're going to go for the glamorous jobs, or maybe the unglamorous, but what you think will be well-paying jobs.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm certified as a coach, life coach. I was already doing life coach, had been doing it for, I think Thomas Leonard created it as a profession in 1995, and I had already been life coaching for probably 15 years before that. But I was like, yeah, sure, why not? I'll get certified to do that too while I'm at it. Why not? And what I experienced when I was doing the training at Coach University and Coach Training Institute, I got certified by a number of different coaching institutions, that the people on the call with me who were now training to be life coaches were lawyers and MDs, especially MDs, because those programs, I forget what they're called, but, the HMOs, that came in and said, okay, this procedure that you've been charging XYZ, we're only going to pay you this much per hour, like $35 an hour.
Right.
As an MD. And then as a coach, I might make 3 or 4 times that much. So you have a guy who you have a man or a woman who went through all of that, medical school and years of internship to become an MD, and find themselves saying, I can't actually make a living anymore as an MD, or I could make the kind of living that I trained for as a coach, and I'm going to walk away from all of that to become a coach. Mm-hmm. So, and maybe in the first place they became an MD because it was about the money. I don't know. All I'm saying is culturally we created a situation where we made it all about the money and job security, and the things that we thought were the job security that were the money, those jobs are not what we thought they were anymore, and now the old contract between workers and corporations where you give your life to the company and they create a pension and then you're taken care of.
Yeah.
We don't have that anymore.
No, we don't.
So now we find ourselves in this transition gap where we made it about the money, and making it about the money hasn't worked out for those people who base their life on that. To a large degree, you have people retiring with no retirement plan or pension, and so they're not. So some can't retire; they're still working when they thought they'd be retired, which would be a great opportunity to get in touch with your life mission. If you're going to work, how about making it meaningful? But then that's why you want to say to, as early as possible, why are you here? And can you develop a work that is aligned with that? And you might find that there would be more people saying, this craft, this guild, if you will, could be meaningful for me. I like to work with my hands. I like being outdoors. Maybe I would like construction. When I had my between college year jobs, I actually really enjoyed building motel units and laying bricks for foundations.
Sure.
Physical hard work, and I loved it. It wasn't my life mission, but it could and would be for people if it wasn't about the money. And, so many of these things, if we made it about the call first, and we stayed with this, making it meaningful, I think that we would find that we would have more people more qualified for the work that needs to be done, and they'd be there because they want to be, and it wouldn't be for the wrong reason.
Yeah. I'll tell you something, Daniel, as I listen to you have this discussion, which I've thought a lot about, because I do know that there's a lot of people who just can't figure out what they want to do, and there are opportunities for them. Well, we can just discuss this over and over and over again, but you've given people an idea about how to follow their mission, how companies can get involved in doing the right thing for their employees, and a little bit about kids, too, and how they need our guidance from an early age. With that said, I want to thank you, Daniel Goodenough, for being on the Susan Brender Show. And if people want to get in touch with you, or they want to get your book, or they want to deal with you on a different level, how do they do that?
Well, they could go to the Caravan of Remembering book site. There's a Caravan Conversations.community site where people can get together with other people from around the world and go through the book and work virtually. Some people are doing that through Zoom calls. Some people are doing that through Facebook. The book is available through Amazon, and also in the e-version, it's available on iTunes and Kobo and Kindle, and it's also available, like I said, in the cafe versions, the print-on-demand little units that are sometimes in cafes and sometimes in libraries. You could also go to the wayoftheheart.com website for that's the site where we're doing the training. There will be a website for the corporate training called the Hugh Person Project. So that'll be hughpersonproject.com.
Well, you're offering our audience quite a few things to consider looking at and to delving into so that they can really figure out, and I'm repeating myself over again, that their livelihood, as you say, is their aliveness, and I think that's fabulous. So, Daniel Goodenough, come back to our show again, because boy, do you have a lot of things to tell people, and I think they're going to be very pleased. So with that in mind, thank you again, and I invite you back to the Susan Brender Show.
Well, thank you. I always enjoy it, and I'd love to come back. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.